Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special National Signing Day edition of Tunnel Vision. I'm your host, Keely, joined by Ryan Abraham and recruiting guru, legend, GOAT, whatever you want to call him, Gerard Martinez. He's kindly joined us in the studio today. Hi, guys. How you doing?
What's
Doing
up?
well.
Yeah, Gerard came all the way from the Inland Empire out for this.
That's how you know it's a big day.
It's a big day.
Or
And
is
it knows
it?
you're a big day,
It's a long
or
day.
it's the recruiting apocalypse because on National Signing Day, Gerard left his house.
His
So
cave, his war room
if
cave.
Gerard
Well, no,
does that, there's
I
really
do-
nothing going on.
I do usually leave the house, but it's to cover an event. I don't go down to be a part of an event where
Right.
it's just sort of, people hanging out because there's nothing really to do because there's really no news to break.
right.
Yeah, well, they're
That's
already...
what Ryan's getting at.
Yeah, what they're getting at is that it's been a pretty anticlimactic day for USC on National Signing Day. We'll get into that. We'll get Gerard's thoughts. We'll also talk about USC's coaching moves. USC made it official, things that had been reported about firings and hirings on its coaching staff. We'll talk about that. And as always, you can call us, talk to Gerard, talk to Ryan, 5124-TUNNEL. Our intern Micah is standing by to screen your calls. And then, of course, you can tweet at us, #TunnelVision. I'll put your tweet up on the screen. And wherever you're watching, may it be a YouTube, Periscope, or Facebook, put your comments, questions, and concerns, and we will answer them as best as we can. Like I said, guys, we're going to start with National Signing Day. As of recording this episode of Tunnel Vision, USC stands at the 55th class overall, 10th in the Pac-12. This is the worst rankings of the internet era for this class. Guys, let's just get your overall thoughts first. What do you make of this class as a whole?
Yeah, Keely, I think you said it before we went on the air. You could just play the instant analysis that Keely and myself did after the early signing period press conference. Pretty much applies. They've only added one player since then, Jack Eure, who's a 4-star tight end from Marietta Valley, and his father Ron was a #1 overall draft pick when he was an All-American at USC. But you look at this class, Keely talked about being the worst of the internet era. So we started keeping track of this, Rivals.com and Scout and all that stuff back in the early 2000s, late 1990s. Before that, it was more like 1-900 numbers and some newspaper stuff. But during the internet era, there's never been a class that's even close to this bad. USC, until last year, never finished outside of the top 13. And that was one of the sanctions years that would still have a whole bunch of 5-star players in it. So last year's 20th ranked class was by far the worst. Now you're talking about the number 55 ranked class. It's just, we've never seen anything like this before. And we have a lot of recruitniks from the message boards on the Peristyle and USCfootball.com that go back to the 70s. Following recruiting was a lot harder then. A lot of newspaper stuff. Sometimes they'd go see games themselves. And all the guys that we talked to said this is by far the worst class. Now, it's smaller. There's fewer people in it, so you're not going to get as many points. It's heavy on linemen, 6 offensive linemen, 3 defensive linemen. But a lot of that's because USC's missed out on offensive linemen over the last couple of years. So I don't buy the excuses. This is an inexcusable class for a program like USC with that prestige to sign. So it's pretty bad. You look at the top 350 players in the country, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite, USC signed 1. That is inexcusable. So it is, to me, I would say this is the worst class in USC football history. It's one that Clay Helton's going to have to put behind him and try to build things up. Class of 2021 looks better already, but this, Gerard, to me, was the worst class I've seen.
Okay. Can I take your torch and your pitchfork and put them aside for a second?
You're going to be the good cop. I'll be the bad cop.
There's really no good cop here. There's only the evil, upset, angry cop and the cop that is off duty already. Because there's not a lot to really say about it that's necessarily positive. I think today was really about, could they make a move with Mike Drennan the second, the running back out of Dublin, Ohio? That was really the only news today, where USC went back and forth. Last night it was Kentucky. I think he called USC to basically say he was going to Kentucky, and they kind of talked him out of it for a little bit, and there was a little bit of wavering back and forth, but ultimately he committed to Kentucky, and that's the third running back that USC has lost. It's been a priority recruit in this cycle, and that's a position that they would really have liked to have gotten a guy that could have been an impact player, and it kind of sort of summed up the class as a whole. I think USC, they got focused in on some specific players. They didn't offer necessarily a lot of players at different positions and recruit those guys seriously. And I think with USC in the running back position, they got hooked in with Bijan Robinson, and they felt like they had a really good shot at him over the summer. He ends up committing to Ohio State silently, and then he turns around and commits to Texas, which is to say USC ended up being 3 out of 3 in his choice of schools. And yet they still kind of lingered around a bit. And I think there was a feeling, he might flip. He might end up going to USC ultimately. Ty Jordan was another guy that they recruited very hard, ends up committing to Texas. They couldn't really get away from that. It was like a bad read that they kind of put all their eggs in that basket. And then when they finally, I think, realized, okay, we got to start offering other running backs, you got into almost October, and there still wasn't really anybody but just Mike Drennan. And then they sort of focused in on him. You go, okay, all right. He's a 4-star barely. He's not necessarily like a big guy that all these big schools are going after right now. That might be a guy they can slide in, they can kind of steal away, and then ultimately they lose them to Kentucky. And so that's sort of just the class in general, where you had some specific guys that they wanted to get. Bryce Young, they really centered in on those guys, focused in on those guys, didn't have a lot of maybe plan C, plan D, and I guess with the season, you have that loss to BYU. You have a really, really bad loss at home to Oregon. I think those two losses really made recruiting during the season pretty much impossible for them. They really got no traction with any new players. They really never developed any new leads with new players, and so they just kept going back to those guys that they had offered, and they continued to recruit over the summer, and they weren't flipping those guys with the season that they had. They weren't flipping those guys when you lose to BYU and everybody talks about Clay Helton, he's fired, and then you lose to Oregon like that. Everybody says Clay Helton is fired. They don't think that coaching staff is going to be there, so they're looking for more stability elsewhere. So that's basically what the class became. It became sort of this mediocre thing that, if it would have come together with the guys that they had plan A, it would have been a good typical USC class. And there was a point there where you go, okay, what's the ceiling for the class? I think we were coming in to early signing day. People asked us, what was the ceiling? That got misconstrued into a prediction for me, but it was ultimately the question was, what's the best this class can do? And at that point, we're going, well, maybe 25. Maybe they can get in the top 25 somehow. You get Flo, you get Bryce Young, you get these guys that they've been there forever. These are the guys that they offered in the spring. These are the guys that they were supposed to have locked up when they were juniors in high school. And that's what USC kept coming back to. And ultimately, they just did not have the season, and they did not recruit well enough to be able to land those guys. And so the plan Bs and plan Cs just didn't seem to be very developed this cycle.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned the early signing period. When we got to talk to Clay Helton in the press conference, one of the things he said was that this class would look different in February. Now, it kind of did. It was in the 70s at the point that he said that. Like I said earlier, it's 55 right now. But they didn't really add much or enough to make it sound like basically what Clay Helton was saying is it's going to look much better in February. Here we are in February. It doesn't look much better. And to kind of add the cherry on top, we didn't really have a Clay Helton press conference on National Signing Day, which is something we're used to. He did go on the Pac-12 network. He did go on USC's own radio show, Trojans Live, but we didn't get to talk to him, us, the media. So it kind of gives this a little bit of the narrative that he's hiding a little bit. Didn't want to answer to what he said in in December. What do you make of kind of Clay Helton not talking to us today?
Yeah, that's another first. So there have always been. Now I know the February signing period has been diminished. It's not as important, but usually it's not important when you sign your Clemson or something. You sign like 23 guys in December, and you're pretty much done. And maybe you add a couple, and it doesn't really matter. USC needed. They fell short in December. Needed to bounce back in February, but there's just not that many opportunities to do that. And like Gerard mentioned, a guy like Michael Drennan, fall short there. There was a quarterback from Texas that was coming off a mission.
Which is interesting. Oh, you're going to go for Finnegan,
Was it
Kate Finnegan.
Kate Finnegan, yeah. Who
Well,
ends up
I was
going
going
to
to say
State.
USC actually they were 54 today, and we just went on air. They dropped to 55, which is an interesting number because USC in 55.
Sure.
But more interestingly, they dropped behind Baylor, and Baylor is the school that ended up signing Blake Shapen.
Oh, the other
who was
quarterback.
the other
yeah.
quarterback from Evangel Christian in Shreveport, Louisiana, who USC felt like they had a really good shot at. Had him in this official visit, and then Baylor sneaks in there with David Aranda as a new head coach and some connections there with Louisiana, obviously being at LSU, and they nab him away from USC at the 11th hour. So Kate Finnegan, we're still waiting to see what the official word is there.
Boise State did tweet out this morning.
They did
that he
announce
signed.
him.
Yeah.
They didn't say sign though in the tweet, which if we're
They said he's part of the
He's part of the
Bronco
family, yeah.
or whatever.
But to talk about him publicly, you would think that he would
yeah,
have
there
to
has
be
to be some kind.
signed.
I don't think they're allowed to compliance.
Now, he's coming
Okay.
back from a Mormon mission, so he's in a little different situation. He's not coming straight out of high school. He's a 2018 recruit, a two-star in the 2018 class, but he was recruited by Graham Harrell.
So wait, a 2-star went to Boise State over USC. Gerard, don't say that. You're the
Well,
bad cop now.
First of all, he went to North Texas before he went to anywhere, and that's where his connection is to USC because of Graham Harrell.
Well, back to the press conference stuff. We haven't seen this. This is the first time, and only adding one player it makes sense. But if you are going to go on your own live show and you're going to go on the Pac-12 network, I think it would have been a good idea.
Well, technically, he didn't go on his live show. He just phoned in.
He did phone in, and his phone cut out at the very end. But
Yeah.
I think it would have made sense, not just for kind of recapping the signing period, and like Keely said, they were kind of talking up there. We're going to add some guys to this. It's not done yet, and it was pretty much done.
Well,
because with some
still
of the
is
misses and stuff.
It obviously makes Mike Bowen look bad too because he had the infamous sort of quote, recruiting is going much better than anybody wants to admit.
Yeah.
Which is tough. You go back to that, and he's obviously coming in new. He has some faith in Clay Helton. He wants to look for reasons to say this is why we brought him back. I'm confident that things are still going in the right direction. That obviously came before the bowl game, and it came before early signing day, and it came before national signing day in February. And all three of those events didn't go well for USC.
Yeah, and I think one real quick thing, though, with the press conference, it's not just the signing period stuff. It's really, you have a new defensive coordinator, Todd Orlando. There's other new coaches, too.
Who we met today.
Yeah, we actually
accidentally.
Yeah, we accidentally met Todd Orlando and Craig Niver at Rock and Rallies. We did a little signing day gathering. We could talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, so it would have been a good opportunity because that's something you can sell. Clay Helton on the live show was very excited about Todd Orlando. The people I talked to at Texas really liked Todd Orlando. Yes, he got fired from Texas, but it was sort of one of those things where, is it like an Apple stock that had a bad quarter and you get to buy it cheap? That's what USC is hoping for. That's a positive that you could sell, and I think they missed an opportunity to do that by not having a press conference.
Potentially just having him be able to even speak because he's a very fired up guy. He's a guy that has got a lot of energy. We've heard that behind the scenes already just with the one recruiting weekend that he was a part of, that, he was more interactive and really engaging with the recruits than Clancy Pendergast had been probably the whole year. And so there's a lot of energy in the office right now because of Todd Orlando, and a lot of people feel like, hey, man, this could be a home run hire. This could really help in some ways be able to kind of turn the corner a bit on the culture at USC. We'll see. Obviously, Clay Helton has to buy into that. It's a very interesting thing where you're looking at assistant coaching hires and you're wondering how much does the head coach buy into the assistant coaches, which is that doesn't happen. It's usually the players or the assistant coaches buying in to the head coach.
Yeah. Now, to be fair, the official response we got from USC is that it's February, not that many players signed. It's usually more hoopla in the early signing period. Could we see a press conference for Todd Orlando down the line, or do you think we just have to wait till spring practice?
I wouldn't count on it.
Yeah, the way the things have been going, I mean, Gerard talked about it. It's like when Mike Bowden made these kind of positive comments, it was before the debacle for the Holiday Bowl and before the debacle for early signing period and February signing period. There's been a lot of misses. There's a lot of missteps, a lot of bad news that has been coming, and we kind of get, they kind of avoid the press more in those situations. So, Keely, I wouldn't. Now, there's still 3 coaches to be hired. We'll talk about that in a minute. Mm-hmm. Maybe when all of them come in, they would have some kind of press conference, especially with not having one at signing day. But that's not really been their MO. We haven't seen them go out and make these kind of special press conferences. So I wouldn't bank on it, but who knows?
Like I said, the one guy that USC got to tout today was Jack Eure, the Trojan legacy, 4-star tight end. On Trojans Live, Clay Helton also talked about Gary Bryant. And Gerard, when I was asking you before the show, who's your impact player, you mentioned Gary Bryant as well.
Yeah, Gary Bryant, I think in terms of the fit, you're looking obviously at the receiver position where you have Michael Pittman move on. The talk has been that Amon-Ra St. Brown wants to move to the outside. Now, there's been some internal talk, and with the recruiting weekend, and specifically talking about Jack Eure, there was a lot of, okay, Drake London is now going to move to the outside. He played mostly in the slot. He played the, as I've heard many times talked about, essentially tight end position, which I have a lot of beef with that because I don't think he played a tight end position really at all. He was just a big receiver inside. There's been talk about him moving outside, and then there's Amon-Ra that wants to move outside, mainly because of draft status. You want to be able to play the outside as well as the inside. In certain, situations, you may be drafted by a team that doesn't play a lot with the slot, so maybe you want to be that guy that's versatile enough that you can go out to the outside. So that's his main thinking of being able to play on the outside, but nonetheless, that's going to open up the slot position for a guy like Gary Bryant, and a guy that we have not seen at USC in quite some time, a guy that is a legitimate speed, vertical threat, a guy that in space makes great plays. He can do a lot after the catch, and a guy that's also going to be crucial, I think, in the special teams with kick returns. He is a weapon as a special teams player, and it's going to be interesting to see because now they have a new special teams coach. That's, again, something culturally that we look at with USC and Clay Helton. Special teams has been a big part of everything they've done, and it's been very sort of a mixed bag, moderately successful sometimes, but then other times, a big kind of a black mark in terms of the game and plays kind of going each way. You want to see more consistency there and perhaps maybe just a less investment there. If you're not going to be great at special teams, take less time on it and just go and try to work on tackling or work on the fundamentals of the game. And you've got a guy like there, though, with Gary Bryant, and we're going to have to see, the guy that they bring in as a special teams coach. Is he going to be more of a kicking coach, or is he going to be a guy that's going to actually go back there and work with those returners and try to make that a part of the game that they can actually get some points out of it? They can maybe turn the field a little bit because they get good yardage.
Yeah. Before we move on to coaching moves, I just want to wrap up National Signing Day. Something we've heard a lot from fans, Gerard, and people who are maybe critical of the criticism from the media is that social media and the negativity from fans and maybe the media has had an impact on recruits and USC's recruiting prowess, if you will. How do you think that plays into it, if it does at all?
It plays. I mean, all these kids, they listen to their parents, and their parents read message boards, and their parents talk to other parents. I mean, there's certainly a ripple effect that happens, but where does that ripple effect begin? Where is the rock that gets thrown into the pond? Well, that rock is every loss. And so when you have those losses, you have all these negative things going on with the universities in general, which, there's things outside of football that I think negatively affect USC. How much do parents hear about that? I think it's just a constant stream of USC being in the wrong side of the headline.
Yeah.
And that just, it has an impact. And it's not necessarily the fans' fault. They have a reason and they have a right to be outraged with the way the investment and the priorities of the university have seemed to shelve football. They're not making things up here when they see that the football team has just sort of been minimized to some extent, and the university has gone with other things to try to push ahead. And it's a matter of, okay, are you kind of undermining the football program purposely? We see that at certain universities where football is looked at as a threat to some extent. And I don't want to kind of go down a rabbit hole here, but the educators and the people that feel like this is all about the education, it's about Nobel Prize winners, it's about something other than sports. And football, obviously, because of the money that it generates, they feel that as a threat, so they constantly try to undermine that. I don't know if maybe USC has some of that in the administration, maybe there's some of that going on, but the fans feel it, and they see it as the football program is basically being disenfranchised, and they're mad. And I think I said this on a podcast. That's a good thing for anybody at USC in the athletic department that wants football to be great again. If you want football to be great again, you take all this negativity on the chin, but you say to yourself, at least they still care.
Yeah, they have a passion.
At least there's still anger there. When they stop showing up all together and you hear nothing and it's just crickets, you lost them. And then if you really want football to be great, then you start to really, really worry.
Yeah, apathy is the main enemy there. And you're seeing a lot of fans become apathetic. They're like, I just can't follow the team anymore. But those passionate ones that are negative, I don't buy that it has a whole lot to do with the recruits. I mean, if you're going to give a list of priorities for what or why a recruit would choose a school, fans being negative on Twitter is going to be way far down there. If you're making,
well, she just asked me if it made an impact.
Not
if it's the ultimate.
But if you're making a stew, you're making a beef stew, and it doesn't taste good, and you're like, well, the meat that I used was expired. That's like the losses. That's the recruiters not calling all the time or not getting plan B. And the negativity on Twitter is like, I used a pinch too much salt. Like, it's a little too salty, but you're using terrible. The bad meat is the main reason why the stew
it's
sucks.
really more of a symptom of the problem, and it just resonates, and then it becomes sort of recycled, and then it becomes a part of the problem. It's a weird sort of cyclical thing. So, no, I agree with you. It's certainly not.
You cannot blame the fan base for why. Like, if the fans were just positive, recruiting would be better. That is categorically false.
So
again, better. I mean, maybe it'd be a little better, but I mean, it wouldn't. Certainly, it's not taking USC from 11th or 10th in the Pac-12 to number 3.
Does Justin Flo sign with USC if there was no negativity on Twitter?
No.
Okay, we can move on.
Right.
So in that sense, though, is this a trend that we're going to start seeing from USC's recruiting classes unless there is a switch in regime or winning starts happening?
We said this last year. The only way to fix recruiting is win or switch the regime. They didn't win, and they didn't switch the regime. And Gerard said this a lot of times before. This class could have been the rebound class from the 20th ranked last year, or the 5 and 7 class.
Which it turned out to be the 2 and 9 classes.
It became worse than a 5 and 7 class. So
it was going to be the Justin Flo class, or it was going to be the 5 and 7 class, and it spiraled into basically being a 2 and 9 class. Because at that point, you think they're going to get Drennan, you think they're going to get Blake Shapen, you think they're going to pull together a couple guys, they end up with 16, 17 commits, and they ultimately lose Drennan and Shapen, and they're still trying to fight out for a two-star quarterback. So I mean, in terms of ratings, this is, and it's really even worse than a bad season. And I kind of talked about this on the podcast before. You have bad seasons sometimes. You have injuries. You have things that happen where you realize you're lining up against other Division I programs that are good football programs. But to lose in recruiting like this when you're sitting on top of the gold mine in Southern California and you've got all the tradition that USC has and you have the location, that's really hard to kind of fathom. It's hard to wrap your head around how you could have such a bad recruiting class. I know the numbers aren't there. Clay Helton has kind of spun it more on, well, it's not a sexy class because we had 6 offensive linemen and we had 3 defensive linemen.
And that's something that I wanted to ask you specifically, Gerard, because you can speak to this. The thing about this was a big man class. We needed O linemen. It's not false. It's not a fallacy, but it's a little disingenuous because the class USC needed to get offensive linemen was the class last year, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
The last 2 years, in fact.
Sure.
Yeah, but the last class was where you had locally, you had 4 or 5 4-star guys. You really had the players that you knew needed to be in the lineup, needed to be on the depth chart to be able to maybe take over for an Austin Jackson, a guy like Sean Ryan that you could put him in there, you could redshirt him, maybe you play him, but you put him back there and you've got him ready to go because you want him to have at least a year at the college level before you're going to put him at left tackle. You don't want to put your left tackle out there as a guy that doesn't have any college experience. You find 6 guys, but are any of those 6 guys really going to play left tackle for you for next year? I tell you what, Keaton Slovis hopes not.
No. Clay Helton on the conference call today, or on the Trojans Live today, made it kind of sound like, because they talked about maybe getting guys from the transfer portal. They left a couple spots open, but he kind of said like one of those guys could come in and contribute. But to me, they all kind of look like projects. Like maybe they'll develop it. They're big. They're all 6'5", 6'6", 6'7", all near 300 pounds, but they don't seem like they're ready to step in and play college now.
It's tough as a freshman, even a really good player that's a 5-star guy, to come in and play offensive line, let alone play that left tackle position where you're covering the back of your quarterback. And we saw USC's quarterbacks go down quite a few times last season. That's the main reason why they didn't get Bryce Young. That was one of the main reasons. But you got to protect your quarterbacks. And you had a guy that's a franchise guy that a lot of people are saying is going to be a first-round pick next year, and you still had your all three quarterbacks you ended up having to play during the season. That's another point of contention. You got to stop that. You got to improve that. And they have the right tackle position that they also have to be able to fill in for next year. So, yeah, the offensive line is important. These guys are not necessarily the guy. I mean, even, like I said, even if it was a class and you have 6 guys and maybe you got 3 of them that are 4 stars, maybe a 5-star in there, you're still going, do we want to play those guys right away? That's college football. You do not want to have to play those guys as true freshmen. Instead, USC gets some guys that are, really it's a lot of projects. Maybe there's a guy in there that could play left tackle, but, I mean, to play next year, I think they're definitely going to the porthole for a left tackle. And they could because there is some talent there.
There is some talent. Hey, real quick, Keely,
yes.
On Periscope, we had a couple international shout-outs, one from Sweden and one from
Eve Malstein.
and one from Glasgow, Scotland. I was just in Scotland over the summer and played I played the old course, so it was awesome. So shout-outs to a 1995 Scotsman.
Very cool. People are keeping track of the Ryan food analogies. I think we also have to keep track of how many times Gerard says porthole instead of portal.
I only said it once, though.
Okay, but we'll see how the night goes. I'm going to ask one more question and jump into calls. Gerard, you can talk about this as well since you're an expert. When people look at the glass half full people, the sunshine pumpers, as we like to call them, when talking about recruiting and the rankings and whatnot, they tend to look at stars and then look at examples like Keaton Slovis or Keenan Kristen and say, hey, those guys were 3 stars and look at how they played. Do stars matter, Gerard?
Yes, of course they matter.
I know, but expand on it.
For every Keaton Slovis that you have, you've got 3 or 4 guys that are 4 stars. I mean, USC... The fear right now with USC is that they're winning 8 games and they are clearly more talented than many of the teams that they play. So what happens when those 4 stars and those 5-star guys, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Drake London, Drake Jackson, Jay Tufele, Marlon Tuilapulotu. I mean, they've got a bunch of guys in the starting lineup that are 4- and 5-star guys.
Talanoa Hufanga, the impact players for USC, think of who was Juju Smith-Schuster a 3-star? No.
Yeah.
Adoree Jackson was a 5. That's USC's DNA. You bring in the 5 stars, the high-ranked 4 stars, and they come in and play. There's going to be some 3-star guys, but you sign a whole class of that and you expect a bunch of Jujus and Adorees, they're not going to be there.
What does USC look like in those close games with ASU and UCLA when you don't have those big playmakers that can sort of play outside of the system and make plays? And, Keaton Slovis turned out to be a really good player. We have to see what he does as a sophomore. Guys sometimes have sophomore slumps. USC has not been great at developing quarterbacks. They have not been great at getting their quarterback from the time that they step on the field to be better when the time they step off the field and they go to the NFL. I think Cody Kessler might have been the only guy that you could make that argument that he left USC better than when he started playing at USC as a starting quarterback. So that's going to be a big issue with
the Matt Barkleys of the world seem to not, they
completely digress.
Yeah.
Sam Darnold digressed. I mean, he went from being a guy that, as a redshirt freshman was all world, and then he had 22 turnovers by himself.
Yeah.
But
with a guy like Graham Harrell, I think that's the hope is you could take a Keaton Slovis who's we've never seen a USC quarterback do that. You'd have the 3-star come in early on as a freshman and be able to play at that level. I think it was a very quarterback-friendly system that Graham Harrell ran. It allowed a guy like Slovis, who's very talented, to be able to shine. But I think JT Daniels, the 5-star, would have shined too.
I mean, that's the hard question is, with the BYU game specifically, everybody talks about, there is an excuse there for USC when you start talking about the injuries. And I don't want to go into it, but with John David or with JT Daniels, he goes down. He doesn't play very well in the Fresno State game. That left sort of a bad taste in the fans' mouth, and they go, "Okay, well, he wasn't going to play well the rest of the season." But on the road against BYU, your first road game, you wonder, does JT Daniels win that game? Keaton Slovis didn't have a bad game, but does JT Daniels win that game?
Did he throw 3 picks in that game? Or no?
Was it 3 picks in that game? I thought it was only 2.
I think that was
I
a
think it
three-pick
was
game.
three, or you could
But
even
he
argue
did-
Matt Fink against UW as well. 3
Yeah.
interceptions.
Yeah, but then Matt Fink turned around and beat Utah. It's this weird thing where you go, okay, there's where you can argue the guys that get hurt came in and they ended up playing well, so you kind of forget about guys getting hurt, and that was actually the starter, JT Daniels. So that's a weird dynamic too. We talk about the quarterback not getting Blake Shapen. We're not really sure what's going on with Cade Finnegan. I didn't get into that, but his father has told us. He told Chris Trevino earlier today that he had not actually signed. And so that was what we had, even though that Boise State had announced that he was at least committed. Usually when they announce something publicly, that means he's actually signed.
Yeah.
So we're not really sure kind of what the situation is there. But that's another thing where you've got JT Daniels, you've got Matt Fink. Don't think Matt Fink's going to really transfer at this point.
No,
He
I
already
think
kind of
he's
went through
gonna
that
be out,
process.
yeah.
But JT Daniels we're looking at. We're kind of wondering, okay, what's going to happen to him if Keaton Slovis is the chosen one. John David Baker, the new tight ends inside receivers coach, talked a little bit on Trojan Live about that second year being the big jump for that offense. Okay, if it happens and Keaton doesn't have that sophomore slump, JT Daniels is not playing at USC. So he's going to have to go. And then you're going to be stuck with 2 scholarship quarterbacks on the roster. So this is another situation where USC, people are going to say, well, they're reaching for a quarterback. They may have to, because you just don't want to get stuck with 2 scholarship quarterbacks on the roster.
Yeah.
Let's jump into some callers because they are calling about what we are talking about. First up, let's go to Cole from Iowa. Hello, you're live on television.
Oh, there's some
Also,
feedback.
mute your stream, Cole.
Keely, Ryan.
Mute your stream,
Keely,
Cole.
Ryan, Gerard, Jack from the 909. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Thanks for having me. Fantastic. Thanks for having me. Love this show. Now, as a Notre Dame guy, of course, we're thrilled that this is a down year for this USC recruiting class. But that be told, USC still has an immense amount of talent. St. Brown alone may be the best receiver in the Pac-12. My question to you is, even though this is a poor recruiting class, when will we actually see it affect USC? 2021, 2022?
2021.
Yeah, thanks, Cole. I think
2021 is when you're going to see the line recruiting and the lack there of getting playmakers on the line, whether it be, a franchise offensive tackle or a guy to be able to replace J2 Fele and Marlon Tui Polotu and Brandon Peely. They were all in that same class. That's going to be real tough when you don't have those linemen. And USC, they get a Kobe Pepe. Okay, good player, had a really good year, but necessarily upside, I don't think I put him there with a guy like J2 Fele as an interior pass rusher. Had a really good year. I mean, he could prove us wrong. He ended up having, I think, 11 sacks and double-digit tackle for losses.
he was a big part of that St. John Bosco team that won a national championship.
But not necessarily a guy I think upside-wise you would compare with J2 Fele or Tui Polotu. You get Tui Polotu, who's Keely loves to say that name. He's, coming in, obviously not as highly touted as his brother. He's got some weight, I think, to put on him. I don't think he's an outside guy. I think he's an inside guy. And then you've got Jamar Sakona, who's coming in, who I kind of actually like more as a guard than I like as a defensive tackle. So that class, that does not equate to what they're going to lose when they lose J2 Fele and Marlon Tui Polotu. And they didn't get those guys really in the last class outside of Drake Jackson. He's kind of the one guy that's going to be, I think, a very good pass rusher. So we kind of talked about it a little bit. When does it sort of catch up to USC? They're beating teams right now where they are definitely have the margin of talent.
Yeah.
When that talent margin starts to go down, what are we looking at? That's the big fear. It's like you're going to go from 8-4 to you barely, you might not be 500 anymore in those games.
I think you got like 17 starters coming back. It's going to be a good talent year for USC. They should be better.
Should be good.
But I agree with Gerard. 2021, I think there's going to be more of a drop off. And that class of 2019 was going to be a little worse, and it got saved with a Brew McCoy coming in and a Chris Steele, who ended up playing a lot last year. Keaton Slovis, who ends up, the 3-star guy, ends up being your starting quarterback. So I think you got some pieces out of that 2019 class that maybe you weren't counting on, especially guys transferring in. You're not going to really have that. You might, Gary Bryant, I think, can contribute. He has a skill set that USC's receivers don't really have right now, even though USC's deep there. I think a Kobe Pepe, he could be good. I think he's versatile on the defensive front, and we're not sure what Todd Orlando's going to run, but you got a 4-down lineman kind of thing. I think he can play the 2 technique, 3 technique. I think he might have an opportunity, but there's not a lot of obvious impact guys. So I think there's going to be a drop-off, but you won't really see it, Cole, until 2021, like Gerard said.
Thanks, Cole, for the call. We appreciate it.
He said, he's a Notre Dame fan, of course.
We have some resident
He's called
rival
before, yeah.
fans.
Oh, but he said, of course, like
he's a nice rival fan. Like we had like a semi-trolling Duck fan last week,
Yeah,
but
that's
it
true. I
wasn't.
forgot about that.
It was not really like that. Was really the only one we've had. Like anyone that calls in from an opponent's fan base has always been very respectful.
Yeah, we have a resident UCLA fan. It's very interesting who watches the show. Let's go to a Peristyle podcast, I guess legend, if I will say. Curtis from Moreno Valley.
Yes, Curtis.
Hello, you're live on television.
Hey, you guys! Great show.
Thank you.
I heard Gerard say that Keaton Slovitz is the chosen one, and he probably will be. But to have JT Daniels, a 5-star after him, competing for the position. I know that Bryce Young is a great player, but at 18 years old, he wasn't going to play over those 2 guys. He might not play the next year. And we should go strictly to the transfer portal. Why get all these 3-stars and walk-ons when we can get people that – I went to the portal. There are many 4-star players, people that are juniors and seniors experienced that can play, that are ready to go. We can't waste time being last in recruiting. We got to go after the best players in the portal. What do you think, Gerard?
Thanks, Curtis.
the only thing about the portal is that they're in the portal, and you wonder why. So if they were such a good player and they could contribute so much, you do have that question mark about, okay, why are they transferring? Now, if it's a school that you've obviously got stacked talent like in Alabama, you say, you know what, it doesn't really matter. That kid's probably still talented. Yeah. He left because he couldn't play there, but maybe there was just so much talent.
He could play at our school.
Yeah, he could not just get traction and get enough reps. Because we've seen the other side of that at USC with maybe Pete Carroll, where there's guys you go, that guy, if he got some more reps, he would be a good player. And so you see that with certain schools. But there's also guys that just try to reinvent themselves. They couldn't play because they just weren't good enough. So you go, okay, I mean, what is USC really getting there? Are they getting a guy that can play left tackle? Are they getting a guy that can play safety or running back if he's leaving? So it's a little mixed bag. I think with the quarterback position, you're not going to see a guy come in from the portal because mainly you've got Keaton Slovis sitting there. And Keaton Slovis is a freshman, going to be a sophomore, and nobody's going to want to play behind him because they figure he's going to be there for another 2 years at least. So that makes it very difficult. That's the one position where I don't think the portal's really an option, and they are going to have to reach if they feel like they need to get another guy at that quarterback position and not, put themselves in a vulnerable spot if JT Daniels decides to leave.
Yeah, I think you got to use the transfer portal in the right way. And if they brought in a right tackle last year, that was right. If they bring in a left tackle this year, that would be correct. Not, like Gerard said, this isn't a situation where you'd bring in a transfer quarterback. Those guys want to play right away. We've seen the Justin Fields. We've seen it's worked. As far as Bryce Young goes, I think that's more of an excuse. If you read my piece on, I'm doing a recruiting deep dive now. I'm halfway through 3 parts of 6. And Greg Biggins is really close to the Young family. He made it very clear that Bryce Young was not afraid of coming into USC. He was not afraid of Keaton Slovis. When he decided to decommit and go to Alabama, Keaton Slovis hadn't become the superstar at that point. So I think he's someone that has a lot of confidence in himself and feels like he can come in and compete right away. He feels he's going to be able to do that in Alabama as well. So it wouldn't be right for a transfer portal for a quarterback in this spot. And I don't think you want to just bring in all transfer portal guys instead of bringing in recruits, but you can fill in some key roles. And I think this year it'll be trying to get a left tackle.
Yep. Thanks, Curtis, for the call.
Thank you, Curtis.
And now let's go to Bobby. Hello, you're live on television.
Hello, Keely, Ryan, and Gerard. How are you guys this evening?
Doing very
What's
well.
up, Bobby?
I tell you, Brian and Keely, you're downplaying it. This is, you talk about Corey Foreman being a fireable offense. Last Wednesday night, you had Clay Helton and Mike Jinks at Mike Brennan's home, and USC's tailback you. You mean to tell me, I know we lost something to Texas, but okay, Texas is a blue blood program, but we're losing a running back when you have a coach, the position coach and the head coach at the home, and then in a week can't close a kid, and he's going to where? Kentucky. We lose a running back to Kentucky. This is mind-boggling. Fly first class, spend money to go for your $100 donors like I used to be, and going to USC to lose to Kentucky drives me nuts. That's a fireable offense. Number 2 point, you don't think there's going to be somebody in the secondary with the new coaches coming in that might not hit the portal? I mean, you lose Chad K and Burns after 1 year. What assistant coaches are going to sit there and actually think about coming with the uncertainty that's going on? And what bothers, the last point that I want to get in, is Texas defensive coordinator Todd Orlando. USC's biggest win was Utah. Utah loses to Oregon and gets killed by Texas. Texas goes 7-5, but they still keep Utah down to 10 points. I mean, something here is not cooking in the right order. Something smells very wrong and very fishy. I'm telling you one thing. This is a train wreck, and you guys at USCFootball.com do an unbelievable job. The train wreck is coming, and it's coming very quickly. Thanks for you do a hell of a great job.
Thanks, Bobby.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Bobby.
it. So,
You're train spotting.
Yeah, Todd. We're looking in the tunnel. There's a light coming. Todd Orlando wasn't the defensive coordinator for the bowl game because he was fired right before that.
But who was?
But yeah.
Yeah, Craig Niver who's now USC's secondary coach. So yeah, they were both part of holding Utah down in that one. I don't think it's going to be hard to find more assistant coaches. I think Todd Orlando will get a couple good guys on the defensive side of the ball. But you're right about could there be some people leaving? And we've seen UCLA stack the transfer portal. We've seen Stanford stack it. USC really hasn't. But to me, that's more about the uncertainty, and you're waiting to see where things fall into place. And Todd Orlando is more of a no-nonsense kind of guy. Mm-hmm. You've had Clancy Pendergast, who wasn't going to be getting in everyone's face, and and keeping maybe not holding people accountable the same way like a Todd Orlando will. You might not like that, and some people might not have liked the coaches that they had, and now that they're gone, they stick around. So there could still be some movement. I think on the defensive side of the ball, depending on who they hire and how those coaches and players interact.
I don't think Clancy was necessarily a guy that was such a nice guy, personality-wise. Some of the arguments you maybe make for Clay Helton, and that's why you see a guy like Todd Orlando come in, and personality-wise, he's so much different, and they would want to leave because of that. I don't think so. I mean, Clancy could be pretty demanding of his guys. He was much more low-key, didn't say a lot, and you didn't hear a whole lot from him on the field. But behind the scenes, he's a guy that could be pretty demanding. He could actually get into players' faces. And there was a little bit of diversity there with the locker room, I think, originally when he came in and kind of how he did things. I think it's more scheme and how much certain players play in terms of position and being able to sell that. I think I could see players maybe leaving because they feel like they're not going to be a good part of that scheme. They're not going to be able to showcase their talent because maybe at one position they're not playing enough or they're having to try to change positions a little bit. We're going to see. I mean, Todd Orlando used a lot of dime defenses at Texas last year, but obviously you're playing in the Big 12. You're playing against a lot of air raid type offenses that throw the ball around a lot, and so you're going to have to play a lot of defensive backs. So we're going to see how that kind of shakes out. I think going back to the second point that was made in terms of Michael Drennan and Mike Jenks and Clay Helton going in home and missing out on that one stings the most. And we kind of talked about that in the beginning with overall thoughts. I keep coming back to that running back position because that was sort of the position USC needed to get a guy in this class. Yeah. And this was a class where you had everything set up to say, okay, you've got Stephen Carr leaving, you got Vi Metalpalai leaving. You want to have that guy ready to go in after next year to be able to hit the ground running, kind of like with the left tackle. You want to have that playmaker to be able to come in after next season and be able to play a lot of minutes and kind of be that main guy. I think there's a lot of things at play here. I keep hearing that Mike Jenks is still one of the best recruiters on the staff. Now, he did recruit the two Texas offensive linemen, Cortland Ford, and Casey Collier. I like Casey Collier. I wish I could see him in person. I really like what I see from him on film. Maybe he's that guy that ends up being the great left tackle. But yeah, there was a lot of misses, and I think some of it had to maybe do with bad reads. Maybe USC kind of thought they were USC, and they had a little bit of that we are SC, which that's become a bit of a pretentious sort of negative connotation. We are SC. We know better. You guys don't know what's going on. You're outsiders. It's not a thing of pride anymore. It became something of, we're in our ivory tower, and we're looking down at you $100 donors. And there's some of that sort of arrogance that sometimes maybe bleeds into recruiting as well. We're tailback you. We're going to get these guys because we're just going to get these guys. Yeah. And those guys didn't show up. In the running back position specifically, you had miss after miss after miss. But like I said, I keep hearing that, he is a guy that's engaged. It's a name that comes up a lot. On paper, I think Mike Jenks would be a good coach. There is one little tidbit, and I was kind of saving this post-signing day. Texas A&M might be interested in Mike Jenks. Mike Jenks is a guy that has a lot of Texas ties. Texas A&M. Texas A&M really kind of looking for a coach that has a little more Texas flair. They've got a bunch of coaches on that staff. It's kind of interesting, like USC, where they have a lot of out-of-state ties from Florida and other places, but they don't necessarily have a bunch of guys that are there from Texas that can really work with those high school coaches. Mike Jenks was a high school coach in Texas for a long time, and he does know those inroads. So there's some interesting stuff there that his name has come up with some other jobs, and it kind of be interesting to see if he left that. Obviously, I think he's making good money at USC. He's very comfortable in the system. I think he likes working with Graham, and I think he likes working with Clay Helton. I think it would have to be a big offer, but I think Texas A&M does have a co-coordinator title they could dangle out there. So it'd be interesting if that might happen, and perhaps maybe even something that, Mike Drennan, I know with Kentucky, there was a lot of hesitation because the coach that's a primary recruiter for him at Kentucky has evidently been rumored about going to perhaps another school, and that was something that really weighed on his mind. So even with, Mike Jenks, with recruiting and these kids, they got to know that all these coaches could leave.
Yeah,
that's
at any time.
You shouldn't be committing to a school because of a coach. But with Jenks, down the line, obviously he's got to get some running backs. That's the proof of the pudding, but
because this is a staff that usually, we don't know what they're going to do going forward. They don't have a recruiting coordinator anymore, but they would recruit their position for the most part. And
which was a different strategy. They did a lot of that, and we talked about that being kind of unique, and that started with Sarkisian and sort of bled over to Clay Helton. You could say, well, you want more accountability because if you're not recruiting for your position's going to be bad. Yeah. And ultimately, you've got to protect your position. But it just seemed like from a territory standpoint, you had more inroads that you could make. And then eventually those inroads that you make and you get your foot in the door because of the connections that you have in that area, you sort of lead that into the position coach. And then you're basically becoming the champion on the staff for your position coach. You can basically introduce him, talk him up, say, hey, this guy's a great offensive line coach, blah, blah, blah. And then you make that connection with that position coach. That's how it's traditionally been done at USC. That's worked at USC. I think USC's kind of sort of going back to that, although, I guess they're just going to have to split up Texas because basically most of the staff at this point is a bunch of Texas guys, so they're going to have to split it up. You got San Antonio, you got Houston, you got Dallas, you got Austin.
Yep. Thanks for the call, Bobby. Always good stuff from Gerard. He's putting little tidbits in our tunnel vision that usually is for the peristyle or the war room, so thanks for that. But Bobby went into something that we're going to talk about next, the coaching moves that USC made and made official on Monday. Chad K, Greg Burns, and Johnny Nansen are out. Johnny Nansen was a part of the staff since 2013, so that seems like a big move in that sense. And then obviously Todd Orlando is the new defensive coordinator. Craig Niver is joining as a safeties coach, and then John David Baker was promoted to tight ends coach. We mentioned he's an inside receivers coach. Officially, he was not named as such, and he doesn't have it in his Twitter bio either. So figuring that out. But what were your guys' thoughts about these moves and where USC will go next? We'll get into that, what Clay said on Trojans Live. But first off, the moves that USC made official on Monday.
Yeah, for John David Baker, he talked about it on Trojans Live today, meeting Graham Harrell when he was in high school, and they just were very close. I think that was someone that Graham Harrell didn't really get to bring anyone with him as far as a full-time assistant from North Texas like Cliff Kingsbury had with Mike Jenks. He might have brought some more people if he stuck around longer, hard to say. but this was someone that he brought with him, and to be able to promote him, now you have an inside receivers coach or tight ends coach, and someone that he's very close with. He said he's very involved in the game planning, all of the stuff. So he's been very involved in this offense, and someone that's very familiar with it. He thinks it's going to be a big jump from year 1 to year 2. So I think all that makes sense. On the defensive side of the ball, like we mentioned earlier, accidentally, and we're at the Rock and Riley's. We did a little signing day luncheon. And some of the people showed up early. We were starting at noon, and we had like 5 people there before it was like quarter to noon. And a couple of guys walk in, and Gerard goes, "That's Todd Orlando." We go over there, and we weren't sure. We had actually tried to get a couple of coaches to come over because we had some members of the athletic department coming over. They were going to see if they could do that. We weren't sure if they came for the event, so I went over and introduced myself. Came over. They talked to the group for a little while. We all got to talk. Craig Niver, he was a higher energy guy. He felt more comfortable, I think, in the group than Todd Orlando did. But it was really interesting to kind of interact with those guys a little bit. And Craig was more, I think he was more willing to kind of jump in and interact.
Craig had some swagger.
There was a little swagger there.
He had a little
But
swagger.
Todd Orlando was a guy that was like, that guy, I don't think you want to mess with. Like, I just had a feeling like, yep, that guy means business. And so it was interesting. We just got to, a brief 10-minute or less interaction with those two guys. And everyone I talked to from the Texas side of things loved them. And like I mentioned before, like a Todd Orlando, it's sort of like, and Clay Helton said this, and I agree with him. Like, if you would have hired him 2 years ago, everyone would have been like, he got a big raise. He was one of the highest paid assistant coaches in the country. He wasn't like Dave Aranda level, but he was pretty high up there. And then, they had a bad year. He could be a little bit of a scapegoat. I think he's okay on the recruiting side. I know Clay Helton was saying he's been great. The Texas people told me he's pretty good, but they really loved Craig Niver and how he was able to recruit. And the way we interacted today, you could see his personality. So I think the additions, I like them. I'm curious to see, the last 3, defensive line coach, a secondary coach, or a corners coach, and then a special teams coordinator, which direction they go there.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think Greg Burns was probably the only one where it was a bit surprising. You didn't know if they'd want to keep on to him. It seemed like he was a player favorite.
Yeah.
But you kind of heard a lot of stuff about Nansen, just a lot of talk from other college coaches and other schools. You knew that he had his feelers out there, and he's a recruiting coordinator as well. He's been one of the holdovers from the Steve Sarkisian era.
The only holdover.
And a guy that was very close with Clay. So that was interesting. You lose Chad Kawaha as well, and that Pauly sort of connection. And there's been a lot of talk about that on the recruiting trail. And it sort of came up with the Justin Flo recruitment, and I don't know how much of it is real and how much of it is kind of buying into myth and legend, but just not a lot of African American players in the front 7, and feeling that there was you weren't getting a lot of playing time unless you were Polynesian, and again I don't buy into that, but that was something that came up with a lot
heard
of
about it, yeah.
Parents and recruits of parents most of all asking about that. And I'm like, well, Drake Jackson had a pretty good year, and I don't think he's Tongan or Samoan. So you want to get guys on the field that can make plays for you. I think there was just a connection to that culture, and certainly early on when USC started recruiting with Johnny Nansen, I mean, he was gangbusters, and they were killing it with the Samoan players and the Hawaiian players. That sort of changed last couple of years. It was like sort of after Penei Sewell's recruitment, they kind of fell off the edge a little bit with some of the top players in Utah and guys like Jonathan Au. It just seemed like something was missing all of a sudden with being able to get those top Polynesian guys. And so it's going to be interesting to see, is USC going to have that representation still on their roster? Obviously, they've made sort of a 180. They've gone from going to Tonga and Samoa and grass skirts and luau's to Texas barbecue.
Yeah.
We've all of a sudden we're gonna go recruit Texas, and Texas is gonna be like our second home. Blah blah blah. I've said this before. It's tough to go into Texas. Texas is not the state where you go in and you find a bunch of diamonds in the rough. Now you can. Don't get me wrong. There are guys that are underrated, but Texas football is very big. And there's a lot of schools that go in there and recruit Texas. There's a lot more schools even that go into Texas than actually go into California. If you want diamonds in the rough, go to Fresno, go to Bakersfield, go to Sacramento, go out of Visalia. There's a lot of places that are blank spots on the map when recruiting sort of those diamonds in the rough, but you got to go find them and you got to grind for them. USC's going into Texas. They've got a lot of pull now. So we'll see, if they're really able to go toe to toe with not Baylor and not TCU, but Oklahoma. You got to go out there against Texas, Texas A&M. Those are the schools. LSU. You're going to go after the top teams, the top players in Texas. You're going to go against Alabama. You're going to go against all those players, all those big-time schools. So that's going to be interesting to see how they fill out the staff, especially, obviously on defense. That's where it is. Defensive line coach has to be a good recruiter. Has to also be a good developer of talent. I think Chad Kalaha, the one thing about him, he had a good track record for developing guys, at Oregon State and Utah, schools that were not necessarily getting big-time players, but you knew, he was still finding them. He was still developing. That was the one thing that you felt pretty good about with him. If you really want to hit a home run, you got to get a guy that can do that, but a guy that can also recruit really well. And I think, Clay Helton sort of broke a little bit of news here saying he's looking for cornerbacks coach. That's interesting. Because
it sounds like they have one lined up. Not
kind of seem like they have somebody in mind, and the shift there I see there is what happens with Chris Claiborne. That's a name that's come up a lot. And if you're going to have a cornerbacks coach and you're going to have a D-line coach and you're going to have a full-time special teams coach, which he also announced, you're not going to have another linebackers coach. So that's sort of a little bit of an interesting, the mindset at least right now, what they want to do. That's sort of the blueprint for it, and I think that cornerbacks coach has got to be a better recruiter than they've had.
Yes.
Greg Birds was okay. A lot of people felt like he was really good at USC. I think that was just because there's not rubbing elbows with a lot of Ed Orgerons and T. Martin these days. You got to get a guy that's a dog at that position. You got to have two defensive back coaches on the roster. You got to have that second. And like you said, Nybar, it sounds like he could be a very good recruiter, but I think you definitely want to pal him up with somebody who's, a younger guy,
a Southern California guy.
That's good, and that's the big thing. You bring that up, Ryan. It's a great point. We're talking about Texas. There's not a lot of local flair here on this coaching roster for Southern California. Tim Drevno? Is that our guy? Is that the one guy that's got all the pull in Southern California?
He went to high school in the South Bay, right around here.
Yeah,
so that's good.
So Cal State Fullerton guy, but not a lot of that understands the circuit and understands the local players, has good relationships with the
Kerry
high school
Colbert,
coaches.
I guess you'd say.
To some extent, he's an NFL guy. Played at North Carolina.
He's like Ventura County, right?
Yeah, but they don't have that guy that's. And listen, T. Martin came from the South and became that guy.
Right.
T. Martin came from the South and was such a good recruiter. He decided, I'm just going to park myself at Sarah High School, and I'm just going to get every player that Sarah High School produces for the next 10 years. And he did pretty good doing that. So, but you need a guy, an LA guy, that really understands LA and really can just lock down stuff just based on relationships. And so I think the cornerback position is sort of, the one that you kind of – it seems like that's where you would want to do it at. But, it could be a defensive line coach as well. I mean, they definitely – I think with defensive line, though, you got to get a coach that understands developing talent. You're not going to get a bunch of 315-pound guys like you are in Mississippi and Alabama and Florida. It's not like the South. You're going to get a lot of 240-pound guys that you got to get them in the weight room, you got to redshirt them, and you got to develop them. Or you got to go to Utah and maybe get the 320-pound guys. But, that's a possibility as well. But, yeah, I think development is very key on both lines for any Pac-12 school. Oregon has done really well. Why? Head coach, offensive line coach. Bringing in a really good offensive line coach. They've gone really hard on developing offensive line talent and trying to get in with defensive line talent and put a lot of emphasis on that. So I think USC would be very, very smart to do some of the same.
Now, I know you just touched on this, and it's hard to answer because the pieces of the coaching staff are not put in place. But how do you expect the recruiting duties to shake out? Who becomes that recruiting coordinator? Who takes the mantle that's kind of gone now?
I don't think they have the recruiting coordinator yet.
It could be Craig Niver. He could be the guy that does that. He's done it before.
It is. I will say this, and I've said this before. That position is sort of almost,
it's more administrative.
Yeah, it really falls more on the support staff anymore than anything. It's a position where you got to organize, you got to get your paperwork together, you got to get your evaluations together, you got to get your visits together, you got to get all your travel together for your coaches. That really lands a lot on support staff. And so, yeah, it's sort of just a title anymore these days with the full-time staff. But
There's a lot of organizational skills that go into
It
it.
usually comes with a little extra money, so that's why I'm saying I don't
Yeah.
know if Nivar's the guy. If they
Yeah.
could kind of put that out there, dangle that out there to try to get somebody else at the D line or
Yeah,
the
if you bring in
cornerback
like a
position.
stud defensive line coach or
Yeah.
cornerbacks coach, I could see either one of those guys
You
doing
slap
that.
it on there just to give them another $200,000.
Yeah, it's doing something like that, and you see, how that would work out. But yeah, I'm very curious to see how that transpires, who they pick to be the recruiting coordinator going forward. I mean, it's an important spot. The good thing, though, for whoever it is, they're bringing in they have 5 new recs out for recruiting support staff people. So they're going to basically double their full-time people, so that there will be more people to help out behind the scenes, where USC's kind of been pretty far behind, especially some of the blue bloods across the country.
Yeah. Now, when this news came out about the firings of the 3 coaches I mentioned previously, we were kind of shocked a little bit because we didn't know how much leeway Todd Orlando was going to have to build a staff. Was that something, Gerard, that surprised you? And where do you think this is coming from? Because this is not something that we've necessarily known from Clay Helton, to go out, get a name that's not related to USC somehow, and then let them have kind of free reign.
Yeah, yeah, a little bit of a surprise. I think, just like I said with Burns, I was surprised. I think that they would try to hold on to maybe a couple of those guys. I think it's ultimately a good thing. You want that defensive coordinator to be able to come in and have his own staff. You really do. Yeah, and I really thought that, with Graham Harrell, that would be something that they may make some moves. And I even said with the offensive line, I wondered, Tim Drevno has been known to be a very good offensive line coach, but if you've got a specific system, you want somebody that knows that specific system. And so I think it's a good thing. Orlando's defense is a little different than Clancy Pendergast's. We talked about that a bit. There's a couple articles that I wrote on the tight front and sort of what that consists of and how it's different. It's not as different as people may think. And, maybe it's sort of akin to the offense, which, the air raid offense, oh my gosh, it's going to be Mike Leach. He's going to run loose with 5 receivers every snap. But that really didn't turn out to be the case. I mean, they used Eric Kromenhoek a lot as a tight end and a blocker in 11 personnel. So, I don't know if it's going to be, monumentally different. I think it really has a lot to do with just play calling, preparation, how they practice. There's a lot of that stuff. It's really a lot of sort of keep it simple, stupid stuff. It's not, Clancy Pendergast, you have to, kind of admit, he was one of the most accomplished coaches that they had on the staff. I mean, this is a guy that he coached in the Super Bowl, right? Yeah. Okay, I mean, he was a defensive coordinator for the Arizona Cardinals in the Super Bowl. That's a big deal. He knew his stuff. They weren't running some rinky-dink high school defense at USC. So I think the transition from that point is going to be pretty easy. Again, Orlando is kind of preaching some of the same things that Graham Harrell preached with the offense. It's keep it simple, stupid. We're not going to be it's going to be real easy to learn. It's going to be faster. But I think ultimately, and this is what the fans have said, everybody's already talked about this, how much contact do you see in practice? Yeah. How prepared are you going to be to go out there and be physical? And can you be physical? Are you going to run an offense in practice? It's going to maybe take away from the physicality that you see when you go and you play Oregon, because Oregon's going to want to run the ball against you. And if you're not running the ball in practice, then you're not necessarily prepared for that. So that's really the questions, is how much reign does Todd Orlando have in how they practice? Does that become a point of contention between he and Clay Helton?
Yep, that's a big question we all have. I'm going to jump into our call queue and then get to questions, and then probably get into rapid fire pretty soon after that.
Yeah,
We've
probably
already reached the
rapid
top
fire
of the
questions.
hour.
I know, it goes by fast.
All right, it's crazy. Let's go to Jamal. Hello, you're live on Tunnel Vision.
Hi. I just want to say, I really think USC is going to upset Alabama
Jamal
with the opening day. I'm saying that right now because it's like I've seen sparks of USC this year. I mean, obviously we had JT Daniels go down and stuff like that. We had a lot of injuries, and with just the players that stepped up, I seen like great stuff. Like, okay, like, that was great, but I also seen stuff is like, okay, he shouldn't have did that or whatnot. But at the same time, I just look at it like, well, if everybody was at full strength and stuff like that the full season, them guys wouldn't have had to, step up like had they did this year. And I just truly feel like the ones that stepped up did a great job, because they probably came in confused of like if they were even going to start, this year. And I just like, I'm like, I've been going through this with USC since like, every year is like, I always be like, okay,
Jamal.
this has got to be
All right.
Yeah.
All right, Jamal, we got you. Thank you.
Sorry, Jamal, to cut you off.
We didn't want to bury the lead there, but
Yes.
now I would agree with him if he's saying USC could upset Alabama by like maybe making crank calls to their hotel in the middle of the night. That would really upset them. But how are you going to go from getting blown out by Oregon at home to 2 games later, essentially upsetting Alabama
Any
in
given
Texas?
Saturday. Any given
You can't.
You
Saturday.
This
play
is a very
to win the game.
It's a very talented team. We talked about that 2020. They got a lot of guys back. The offense should be better. I think the defense will be a lot better. But that's a pretty big jump. If you were have any confidence saying that USC is going to upset a obviously really good and upset Alabama team that's not very happy that they didn't make the playoff for the first time in college football playoff history, that takes some guts, Jamal, to say. I wouldn't go there, but USC is a talented team and they're capable.
I agree. It's a bit of a stretch. Alabama is going to have a new starting quarterback. They're going to have a quarterback competition, so there's going to be something there. But obviously with USC, they've got to figure out sort of how they're going to defend that quarterback, because it could be Bryce Young or it could be a guy that's a little more pro style. You just don't know who they're going to throw out there. They've got a few guys that could end up getting that job. But
what happened the last time USC played Alabama? They played like the veteran guy, then they played somebody else, and then they bring in Jalen Hurts, and he goes absolutely bananas.
Yeah.
Maybe that happens. Maybe they play a couple of guys and they bring in Bryce
Dallas
Young.
has just not been good to USC.
No, that's the other
Not at
thing. It's
all.
like USC.
But see,
I've been in
USC
both of those games. Keely, we've both been there.
Yes.
It's not been pretty, Jamal.
No.
It's not been pretty.
USC has ringers on their coaching roster now, though. All those guys are
Texas
gonna have
guys,
inside,
yeah.
and they're going to be able to
Pride.
spy on Alabama, and maybe that'll
Fair.
help. So there you go.
Interesting. Just a friendly reminder to our callers, please keep it short.
Yeah.
We love your thoughts and opinions, but we can't have all day here. Let's go to Dave.
Don't ramble
from-
on, is what she's saying.
Pretty much. Dave from Iowa. Hello, you're live on Tunnel Vision.
Iowa.
Hey, Tunnel Vision, good to talk again. I just got to ask, what was the thought process of offering Kate Finnegan so late in the recruiting process? I mean, right before signing day, all my friends are giving me shit about it, of the fact how the 2-star declined a free education, basically, at a rigorous academic institution. What are your thoughts?
I thought we were going to talk about the caucus.
No.
Yeah, Finnegan. Well, you know what? We don't know if he has actually officially turned USC down
Right.
yet. They
But
could
why?
still
But why
get him.
make an offer like that at the last minute?
Because they have to reach for that position, because they can't get caught with their pants down and only having 2 quarterbacks on the roster, or the 2 scholarship quarterbacks on the roster if JT Daniels decides to leave during the summer. That's what it comes down to. It's just having another guy there to be a scouting quarterback. And Graham Harrell felt that he had a relationship with him when he was coming out of high school, and feels obviously that he's good enough to be at least serviceable.
Yeah.
And so he's going to make that call and say, hey, how's Argentina? We want you to come to Southern California.
Yeah, but the optics, the optics are terrible. Where you can't, if you can't switch a 2-star at the last minute, like we've seen USC do this a lot, where they go out, they hand out an offer at the very end to some 3-star guy, and boom, he jumps on board, and like that would always happen. Like you missed out on a couple of guys, but you always had that backup. USC's not had the backups. They weren't getting their frontline guys. They weren't getting their second line guys. To put an offer out late in the process to a kid that hasn't played in a couple of years, was coming off a mission that was a 2-star,
But what do you
and he
do?
would rather
What's-
go to
what's
Boise
the-
State.
What's the practical
the optics
alternative?
but the optics are bad. Like your friends will give you crap because
You lose
you
Bryce
couldn't get
Young, 5-star from Mater Dei High School, which is a pipeline to the University of Southern California. Bruce Rollinson, USC alum. How long was he committed to USC, and you lose him to Alabama? I mean, the optics don't start well, so they're not going to get much
and they
better.
didn't end well either. That's not a good,
Yeah, it's just that.
That's Clay Helton's cell phone.
But they're
crapping out at the end of the live show.
But to give you the explanation, the sort of, okay, it's terrible, and it's sort of like the state of USC football right now, the state of decay. It's a matter of,
We
okay,
should just end
you
this
got to
show.
at some point you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and say, okay, what's the take from this? Ultimately, what's the take from this? The take is you got to get another quarterback in this class that can be able to throw the football. That's not just going to be a guy that's going to be a walk-on type guy. You want to get a Division I caliber guy. Now, you can make the argument, no, you should go after some guy that's not even a Division I guy in terms of his scholarship offers, and just go grab a guy that you think physically could play, get him as a walk-on, and then be able to convert him into a scholarship guy later on down the line. I don't know that USC won't still do that. They have the ride. It's available. They got to get a guy because you just don't want to end up with two Division I level guys on the roster, and you really, when you're talking about scout team quarterback, it's really your third team quarterback. It's really your third quarterback on the roster. It's a guy that's really going to be going against the scout team. That's going to hurt your defense if you don't got a guy that can legitimately throw the ball 15 yards downfield with some velocity.
Maybe they could get Jack Sears out of the transfer portal.
Ooh.
You guys are spicy today.
Where did Jack Sears end up going? Because he was going to go to San Diego State.
He's back in the portal. He was at San Diego State. They had the coaching change. He's back in the portal, so he's withdrawn. Yeah.
Interesting. All righty, let's jump into questions. First up, Randy on Facebook says, does USC go after Zachary Evans now or look to the porthole for a running back?
I kind of think
we'll
neither.
rapid fire these, yeah.
I kind of think neither. They're not going to go after Zachary Evans. They had a chance to do that. They didn't move on it. Integrity. And I think with the porthole, there's more of a chance there. I think, and I'm writing a piece on this right now, I think you're looking more at offensive tackle and potentially a defensive back, probably a safety. I think that's sort of where they're looking at first. But, a guy like Ricky Slate just ended up in the porthole, evidently. He's transferring from Penn State, 5-star guy. There might be a situation there where you start to look at best player available. And when you go safety, running back, might be running backs right now that are the best players available in terms of talent.
That's good. It's a need.
I mean, Jamel Cook is the highest rated safety right now in the porthole.
Really?
And he sounds familiar.
Yeah, it was at USC. Decided to go to the other USC. Not happy there either. Sounds like USCs are not his place.
Yeah, go somewhere else.
Adrian on Facebook says, do you guys think that maybe the media criticism has finally gotten to Clay in regards to not having a presser today?
We've seen a little bit of that. I mean, it's
he
tough.
didn't tweet for half the year.
He didn't tweet. Mike Bone isn't tweeting. I mean, there's a lot of. They know there's criticism out there, and if you can avoid it, I think they're going to. The last press conference didn't go very well. Clay for the early signing period. Clay just didn't answer the questions all that well, and there was I think there was a good amount of tough questions from the media. I start them off with why not being able to keep the best players in Southern California, and I think it would have just been a lot more of that. But it's I think he's feeling the heat for sure. He's been feeling the heat for the last couple of years, and that's why there's been more. I think that's part of the reason why there's been more restrictions on the media, practice closed. Him not addressing the media as much, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Marco on YouTube wants to know what's happening at Stanford. Why is everyone transferring?
So both starting guards are gone. There were some. Okay, so Stanford, there'll be an excuse that it's hard to get in their graduate programs, but that hasn't seemed to be an issue from before. There's some guys. I think their backup tight end went into the portal and then came out because
a couple guys went in and
came back. Yeah. Now they recruited. Stanford had the number 3 recruiting class in the Pac-12, but KJ Costello leaves. He goes to Mississippi State with Mike Leach. Davis Mills was. He looked really good, but. It's a little concerning of what's going on there. There seems to be a lot of optimism with the young players and more pessimism with the older players that are transferring out of the program. So
Stanford's an easy place to go 7-4 and 7-6 and 8-4 and I don't know. Stanford,
they've taken a step back. I'm not sure they're going to get back to the Harbaugh.
Harbaugh was such a catalyst for them, and I've talked about that with just USC and. Whatever coaching changes they make, he changed the culture there at Stanford. He did a miraculous job at Stanford. That was a small miracle that he did at Stanford.
We have a quick one on Periscope. Will Trevor Trout contribute in 2020? That's from M. Mosley 30.
Not very much. I mean, you got Drake Jackson there. You've got Jay Tufele. You've got Marlon Tuipulotu. That's the front. That's the starting 3, in my opinion. And you got to figure out who that Jack is going to be, who that guy that's going to be the stand-up outside linebacker on the strong side is going to be.
Yeah. One real quick hot take from great Halos fan.
Oh.
Yeah, great. So I wanted to get that for Keely.
Thank you.
Does USC go into the bowl season ranked higher than LSU? He says LSU might be 8-4. No, I don't think so. I think LSU will still be
People don't believe in Ed Orgeron, huh? He's a one hit wonder.
No, yeah.
Hey, we're gonna get back there in that bowl game. We're gonna be at national championship.
Yeah.
I was just about to ask for your impression, so thank you, Gerard.
I've been doing that all night for Keely.
It's hilarious.
All fair.
Even a Russian.
Sorry, we had to do a little
Orgeron.
Periscope love.
No, good job, Ryan. Mark Watkins on YouTube says when Eure first committed, people like Greg Biggins were projecting him as a left tackle down the line. Is that still a possibility, or does G. Martin think he'll stick at tight end at USC?
I still think that's a possibility. Certainly with the bloodlines, with his size. We talk about franchise left tackles. You need one at some point.
Yeah.
And ultimately, you look at, hey, how much can you get paid as a franchise left tackle as opposed to perhaps being a franchise tight end? You're going to get paid a lot more being a left tackle. So we'll see. He doesn't want anything to do with left tackle. He doesn't want to play offensive line. He doesn't want to hear about it. He wants to play tight end, and he wants to be, Gronkowski. So we'll see if he's able to develop like that in this offense.
Yeah.
Alexis says, is USC's tight end group the best they've ever had star-wise?
No, they've had some better.
They had, when they had
Fred Davis. And,
well, I mean, even after that, when they had the star-wise, they had, that year where they had Junior Palme, they had the kid from Lancaster.
Bryce Dixon.
Well, I don't know if Bryce Dixon was on the roster then, but they had a year. Pete Carroll's still there. It was like 2008, 2007, and I'm just blanking on the guys. They signed 3 that year, and like 2 years after that, it was the most ridiculous looking bunch, man. Like Brandon Carroll was over there just throwing balls to him, and it looked like just NFL guys.
Was it Jordan Cameron in that group too, or is that a different?
Cameron might have been coming in. They had I can't remember the 2 other kids that they had. I just remember Palme. Palme was a beast.
Yeah,
that's unfortunate that he didn't pan out. That's a guy that a lot of people thought was going to play on Sundays, but no. They've had some good tight end
group
groups.
though. This is a good group, but
it's a solid group. I mean, we're gonna have to see how healthy Daniel Imatorbhebhe is when he comes back. Keely's going to know because she breaks everything on Daniel Imatorbhebhe. She is the source for Daniel Imatorbhebhe news.
Speaking of tight ends, Marco on YouTube said, is Josh Follow not cutting it at practice? He essentially wants to know why we haven't seen more from him.
I don't know, man. NFL scouts like the way he looks, but just I don't know if he's played as at the level he needs to play.
I don't know. I mean, I think that's a kind of one of those things you point to, lack of player development. A guy like that just not getting any catches, I mean, the tight end position, and this is the whole cynical part of, Eure, is that they had something like 15 catches combined. And it was really Kromenhoek, who was a guy that, is more of a blocker that had most of the catches.
Yeah.
So, John Baxter was a tight end coach. He not really developed tight ends. He was more a special teams coach. I think, maybe with John David Baker, a guy that's really focused on trying to develop tight ends, maybe they actually have somebody that's, in the room during the install that could pound the table a little bit for those guys and say, look, I see a mismatch. I see a place where we can actually get the ball to the tight end.
Yeah.
Eric Burns on Periscope says Xavier Grimble.
Xavier Grimble was in there, and there was another guy that didn't qualify academically. At first, I'm blanking his name. I could see him.
We'll move on.
But they've had some really good looking tight ends, man.
Yeah.
Ryan, you're not contributing to the rapid fire.
I'm sorry.
Tamatsud on YouTube says, given that we'll lose a ton of talent after next year, will USC no longer be able to claim that it's the most talented team in the Pac-12 for the first time since the 90s?
Potentially.
Yeah. So 24/7 Sports does a pretty good job with their talent. Like it's a talent, a class talent, whatever. I forget what they call it, but every year, so they put it together. It's like all the recruits. So say you have a great recruiting class, but half the class leaves. They take that into consideration. So it's a talent index for every team. And USC's been number 4 in the country the last 2 years and lost 12 games. That's probably not good. I think they'll fall down a little bit this year, and then the next year it'll probably be a much bigger fall off. But I still think they'll be the highest rated team in the Pac-12 as far as talent goes on their talent index. But after that, I think you'll see a more significant drop off.
Yeah, 2021.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Bobby on Facebook wants to know, will fans...
Randall Telfer.
Oh, good point. Will fans ever see Solomon Tuliaupupu on the field?
That's a good question. We talked to his dad during the offseason, and he's finally got the surgery, and the surgery worked. They did the surgery the first time, and they did an X-ray of his foot before the surgery when he was at Mater Dei, and then they did the X-ray afterwards, and it looked the same, exactly the same. So it didn't work, and so they had to go back in, and now they've actually fused, I believe, something in there. There's a whole process to it. He went into it, but they are more hopeful now. He's not going to have the flexibility that he had. So it's going to be a little interesting to see, how he plays like that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's guys that have had the surgery and they've been successful and they played in the NFL. So, they did a little different procedure. And so now he's able to try to get going and not actually have the injury kind of just back at square one. So we'll see. It's hard to say. It's just one of those things that,
we saw him like one practice, so we want to see him a little bit more of this time.
He's doing some off-season workout stuff, and he's put some stuff on Twitter, and he looks like a beast. So
It's a really hard injury to come back from. That's what Cam Newton has too, right?
I think he did.
Yeah. Randy, I'm not sure if I missed this, but he says, Gerard, can you give us any more tidbits about the light at the end of the tunnel? Not sure if you said that.
No, that was a post on the peristyle.
Oh.
I can't. I really can't.
I know what it is.
It's not, and it's one of those things that, we kind of have to see it. It could kind of fall apart and not happen at all. I'll let you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. I always do after the fact, but it's pretty sensitive. It's still pretty sensitive. And even I kind of went out on the limb a little bit, just even putting it out there. It was one of those things that there was other things happening where we kind of were sitting on some information and then it ended up going out. And we kind of got scooped. So it's like, hey, there's potentially something good coming down the road. We know about it. We'll keep you updated and give you more information on it as it comes through. So,
Coley White says, so if USC has one of the poorest recruiting classes in the Pac-12, what 2 or 3 schools got the best recruiting class? Oregon, Washington, Stanford, or did Cal out-recruit SC?
All those, yes to all of those things. SC. Oregon, Washington, Stanford, and Cal out-recruited USC. Yes to all of them.
Yes.
It was Oregon had the best one. They got 2 5-star linebackers from the Western region. I mean, they did a really good job. They flipped somebody today from Alabama, I believe, an offensive lineman. Washington had a really, really good class. Jimmy Lake doing a good job there. Stanford, like I said, they had the 3rd best class. Cal did pretty good. The only teams behind USC were Washington State and Arizona. Yeah.
Gerard, new Zoo Guru on YouTube wanted to know, what is your relationship like with recruits, like the whole process, and would you ever become like a Gavin for a school?
No, I'm a writer. I'm a journalist. I went to school for this. That's what I do. Great relationships, but I do like to keep it professional. I do like to keep it, I'm here not to be a part of the process. I'm here to cover the process. I think some people get that kind of confused. It's easy to kind of, befriend and then you kind of get lost in the shuffle of it all. But at the end of the day, I do like to kind of take a step back and, just be very upfront with, I'm here to get information. I give information. I'm not a recruiter. I'm not a bag man. I don't have anything to do with any of that kind of stuff. I'm here to just, write a story and tell hopefully an accurate story with information that gets your side across as to, why you picked a school and genuinely what you're going through with the process and being able to express it. And, kids have Twitter nowadays, which is different than when we first started doing the site. And they can tell their story directly. But a lot of times it's not necessarily they don't know how to articulate it properly. They're going through things and they're thinking things. They have reasons that they can't actually get out. And so that's what I'm for. I'm a vessel of sorts to be able to put that out there.
But if Gerard wanted to do that, he would do a very good job of that. And there would be schools that would be interested in hiring him, I would say.
Alexis wanted to know, what is the deal with Taylor Katoa?
I haven't heard. Coming back from a mission.
He is potentially going to come back this summer. It's a little bit on him also. There has not necessarily been a recommitment, a reaffirmation.
Right.
But the expectation is that he would come back this summer. And, it's interesting. I didn't get a yes or no as to whether that spot could potentially be filled by a porthole guy.
Yeah.
That's a potential. What's that? Was that 2?
That's 5.
Is that, that's 5, Keely?
That's 5.
Oh, okay.
5 shots if you're drinking at home.
Oh, that was one. I pulled that one out of the Chris Trevino
If
vault.
anyone watched the vlog on the Peristyle. Michael says, what has to happen for USC to be back?
Oh, God. Well, this is
Texas
rapid fire?
back, folks. Yeah.
A lot.
He just wants you to say fire Clay Helton. That's what he wants.
I mean, that's the easiest. That's the easiest way. It's like a regime change, But if you go out and beat Alabama, like Jamal said,
they're not hiring Urban Meyer. We know that. I feel confident in saying that, even like I've been saying for the past 2 years.
Don't say never.
I just don't feel like that's going to happen for USC. I think you're looking more at them trying to set the table, get things straight, perhaps with the administration, maybe even with the BOT to some extent. If everything goes well, they figure out the culture there first. They kind of move out people they need to move out, and they need to get everybody on the same page with the athletic department and say, look, football is big.
That's what
for
they're
us.
starting to do already.
Football is a part of the crest. Okay, football is it's a pillar of this university. And then once you get the pieces in place and you get everything kind of sorted out, then you bring in a guy like a PJ Fleck that can sort of rebuild the program, a guy that maybe was at a smaller school but has the energy and everything, and they go that way. I don't foresee them going after Bob Stoops or Urban Meyer or some big, huge name and just interjecting him and saying, okay, you teach us how to figure it out. I don't feel like they want to do it that way.
We'll see.
Justin on YouTube says, any chance USC revamps the marketing department?
In recruiting, yes. In general, I have no idea.
Yeah, the recruiting stuff, they're like we said, they're doubling the staff there. There hasn't been any changes in the athletic department. We know like Jose Eskenazi from the marketing part, some other guys there, but I haven't heard of any sort of changes there. There's probably going to be more additions throughout the department too, so we'll see there. But we haven't heard anything as far as that goes.
Someone wants to know what happened to Shotgun.
What happened?
We sent him home. We're gonna have
He
like
died.
it's a lot easier to have the three of us here. We've tried to do it where there's four. It's just a little congested, so we gave Shotgun the night off. He can go write about baseball tonight.
I was saying there's a baseball game being played somewhere. So
Yeah.
He'll be there. That's pretty much it, unless anyone wants to get some final questions in. Sorry if I missed your question. Ryan, was there anything on Periscope? Shouts to Periscope.
We have Apache USC Las Vegas. With all the damage Clay Helton has done, is he an enemy of the USC fan base? Greedy. Clay Helton take your money and resign. We get this a lot. There's a lot of fans that are like, if he had integrity, he would just resign. It's like, you can't blame Clay Helton for taking the USC head coaching job. If any of us were offered that, we'd say, hell yeah, we'll take the job.
I wouldn't.
You'd have to blame the
I
people
really
that
wouldn't.
are. You wouldn't? Like,
He's a coach, though. I mean, this
Yeah.
is his dream job. This is his profession.
He's not quitting.
He got the first class ticket. He didn't pay for. He just sat down in the seat. Nobody said anything.
Yeah, I like the way you put that. So, yes, it's not – and people want to say – they don't like him, so they want to say he's a bad person. He's not a bad person. He's a good person. We like him a lot. I mean, he's very easy to do – he's nice person to deal with. But it doesn't stop me from saying I don't think he should be the head coach of the University of Southern California anymore. I mean, I've said that a million times.
I haven't said it.
But I have and I will. But I hate it when it gets personal. And no, he's not going to resign. Sorry.
Yeah. Kip wanted to know, we already touched on this a little bit, but are there any future tackle targets for USC?
Porthole.
Okay, we're at 10.
Andy wants to know
get a
what
round
about
number
so. He said why he said that's why Claiborne needs to be hired. Can you address what's going on with him? So he's talking about Chris Claiborne, and what Clay Helton said on the Trojans live show is he mentioned cornerbacks coach, defensive line, and special teams, which would mean no linebacker coach. Todd Orlando has coached linebackers everywhere he's went. USC had 2 linebackers coaches last year. Now we'll basically have none. They'll have Todd Orlando, who's a defensive coordinator that will coach them, but it doesn't look like.
And you can't. I mean, Todd Orlando's a defensive coordinator, so obviously he's got a lot on his plate.
Yeah.
You do traditionally see that the assistant to that position is usually at that defensive coordinator position. It's sort of the overlap there because you've got the defensive coordinator and he's focused on the whole defense, and then you have that other assistant coach that can be a little more specific on just that whatever position that is. So, I mean, I would think that there would be some consideration there. I can't remember what they had at Texas. I believe Texas was set up the same way, though, as what Clay Helton said. I think there was a cornerback coach. There was
Safety coach.
There was Niver. There was, and then there was a defensive line coach. So maybe that's the way he likes to do it. He wants to have control over the linebackers. He wants to focus on the linebackers, and that's going to be his thing.
Yeah, I kind of like that because I feel like the amount of talent we saw from the linebacker spot was far below what the production was, and now you're going to have a defensive coordinator kind of focus on the linebackers. I think you're going to get a lot more out of those guys like a Palier, Noah Dote, if a Solomon, Tuilapupu can come back and be healthy. I think you're going to see some good contributions from the linebackers.
Oh, we had a question. When is the next Tunnel Vision show, boss man?
Good question. Probably. Are we going to go back to Sundays or Thursdays, or what do you feel like, Keely?
Are we deciding this right now?
I don't know.
Well,
We'll
is it
do
going to
it.
be dictated eventually by spring ball?
It won't be this
True,
weekend.
very true.
Yeah,
You might
we'll
lie.
find out when the spring football is. Apparently, according to the Pac-12 Network and Carol Folt, the spring game will be on April 11th. So I guess you could
The
count,
first spring game.
you can count back 6
Did she
weeks
say the
from
first
the-
spring game? Like there's going to be more than.
Yeah, I don't know.
Is it a game?
Yeah.
Is it a showcase? What is the name this
It's
time
called
around?
the Huddle, ladies and gentlemen.
It used to be the Trojan Huddle. They need to get back to that. They
That's
need
the-
to play a regular game again. Just stop all this nonsense that they were doing before.
Yeah.
Maybe they will. We'll see.
We shall see. We have some other questions coming in, but I'm going to wrap it up. Any
Yeah.
final thoughts, guys? Gerard, thanks so much for making the trek down.
you
We
for having
always
me. Thanks,
appreciate
Gerard.
your expertise and wisdom.
Thank you, Gerard. And thanks to everyone that came out to Rock and
Yeah.
Riley's today. I know it wasn't an exciting signing day. People made fun of us having a little meet and greet. But Chris O'Dowd, the first USC freshman to start at center,
Yeah.
right? Pretty
Taylor
cool for
Mays.
him. Taylor Mays, three-time
money.
All-American. Lawrence Jackson, another three-time All-American. So we had some studs out there. Scott Wozniak from the athletic department, Brandon Sosna from the athletic department. They came over. So thanks to all them. The whole USCfootball.com staff
Dan
was there.
Weber was there.
Yeah.
Our
money.
whole staff was there.
We had the whole
Crazy.
staff there. It was great. We put some pictures up on Twitter and Facebook and all that
Instagram,
stuff.
Follow us
Instagram, yeah. The Pear Style. You can follow us there.
at Keely's my name.
Yeah.
We had some confusion. People thought that there's a long break until the next television. That's not correct, though, right? We'll be back soon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We're not like taking a whole lot of time.
This is
We're not going to
Keely's
do one
world.
like this Sunday.
Keely would fall apart.
Probably next Thursday, I would guess, would be the next one that we do. So
Yes. Alrighty. That's going to wrap it up. Any final thoughts, Gerard?
No.
Have the final word? The final
No.
word is no.
Zip.
Zip.
final words, he's driving back to the IE.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's rough. Good luck with that. Alrighty, thanks so much, guys, for watching. We'll be back. That's Ryan. That's Gerard. I'm Keely. We'll see y'all next time. Bye.
See ya.
TTFN.